the words that are music to my ears more than anything else is, I never thought I could homeschool before this happened, before, the COVID and the school shut down and all of these things. I never thought I could homeschool. I never had the confidence that I could do it. And what having my kids home did for me was show me that I absolutely could. I absolutely could be a homeschooler, and I really like it. And I'm going to keep on homeschooling. And that's what we are going to be talking about today on this episode of 10 Minutes to a Better Homeschool. Hi, I'm Pam Barnhill, and I have helped thousands of homeschoolers create doable systems, beat burnout, and bring more joy to their homeschool days. Welcome to episode 3 of the 10 Minutes to a Better Homeschool podcast. So talking today about if you are a homeschooler who has decided, you know what, we're going to homeschool permanently after COVID. We never thought we would do it for whatever reason, whether it was, mom had the confidence to do it or not. Sometimes that's a big thing. Other people are just like, this is what our family's always done. Our family's always gone to public school. We're going to send our kids to public school. But then they got those kids home this past year and found out that their kids were happier and their families were happier having the kids at home. And so now they've decided we're just going to keep on doing this. We are making this a permanent change to our lives. Now, I'm using the word permanent to mean long-term, but as all homeschoolers know, permanent is a really weird word. None of us ever know for sure if our homeschooling is going to be permanent or not. We all kind of, look at what's best for each child year after year and ask those questions. So permanent homeschooling for you could mean for the next 5 or 6 years, and then maybe a kid does go to high school. But when I'm using the word permanent here, what I really mean is long-term homeschooling. Like, this is going to be the de facto lifestyle for our family, that our kids are going to stay home and homeschool instead of, sending them back to school, even when the world opens up, if it does or does not ever go back to what we considered normal. So that's what I want to talk about. So how do you make this decision to do this? And, it's really a simple decision to make. If you are enjoying homeschooling, if you're enjoying being with your kids, if you see differences in them that you would like to keep, then I think it's an easy decision to permanently decide to make that switch. The first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the difference between homeschooling and remote learning? And I cannot stress how huge this question is. What is the difference between homeschooling and remote learning? And how big is this question? So big, because they are not the same at all. Remote learning is all about doing the curriculum, doing the lessons that someone else is providing for you. Rumors that I heard was it was putting kids in front of a computer, even very little kids, for hours and hours at a time, because they had to mark time. They had to put in so many hours, and that it was excruciating. And the wonderful thing about homeschooling is you choose your own curriculum. And I know that can be a little scary, but you choose your own curriculum. You get to decide what subjects you're going to learn, and you get to decide how many hours you're going to spend doing it, because even in states that require you to track a certain number of hours, remember, everything your child is doing, especially when they're kindergarten and first grade, is part of learning. And so you can count that as part of their learning hours. So all of the personal hygiene that they do, all of the hours spent playing outdoors, the hours that you read to them, the hours they spend listening to audiobooks, any time that they spend watching educational programming, cleaning up their room, all of these things count towards the hours. So it's so much easier than what you might think to get in the hours that you need. And direct instruction time for homeschooling is way less than it ever was in the public school system. I used to teach 7.5 hours a day I have never done a 7.5-hour school day before in my homeschool. So even with high schoolers, we're usually done within 5 hours. And when my kids were really little, we were talking, an hour and a half at the most, because it is such an efficient use of time. And you do have that wonderful teacher-student ratio in your lessons. You're either working 1-on-1, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, something like that. And just, it's so much easier to do. So homeschooling versus remote learning. In my book, homeschooling wins hands down every single time. Not that it was a contest, but it's just so much easier to homeschool. So let's talk about how do we make that switch to homeschooling. And the first thing I want to stress, I have 2 points here. The first thing I want to stress is to keep doing what's working. So if there is something that you've been doing it in your home, some schedule you've been following, the number of breaks that you've been giving, books that you've been reading, if you have been using some kind of curriculum that you really enjoy and your kids really enjoy, don't change things. You don't have to change as much as you think you might. So if something has been working for you, keep doing that. If remote learning has been working for you, there are kind of K through 12 public school things that you can do at home. And you know what? There's no shame in that. If that works for your family, keep doing what's been working. Then the second thing I'm going to suggest you do is start embracing your freedoms. Start branching out and think differently about education. Start thinking about other ways to do things other than this traditional model of education that you grew up with, because I'm here to tell you there are so many other models of education out there. There is one model of education that is used in United States schools and that is taught in United States schools, public schools anyway. You get into private schools and you start finding a few other models of education, but when you look at history, when you look at the way people have learned, when you look at all of the options that are out there, there are numerous other models of education out there. And so start investigating those. And I have a great series of blog posts where we highlight basically 4 additional models besides the traditional model. And I will link that for you in the show notes for this episode. So you can actually start looking at what those other models are and diving into them and seeing what homeschooling is like for families who have chosen a different path. And then finally, let me give you 5 resources that I think are actually really helpful as you move from maybe we can do this into, oh goodness, this is what we want to do. We really want to homeschool permanently. And so the first resource I want to give you is our free community of homeschoolers. We have a drama-free community off of Facebook. It does have an app that we use, or you can access it on your computer, so phone or computer. It's absolutely free. I'm going to drop the link in the show notes, or you can go to members.pambarnhill.com and request access to it. And it is just a fabulous, wonderful place to connect with other people who are homeschooling, who love homeschooling, and who want to be the best homeschool teachers that they can be. So that is a great resource for you. The next resource I have is the Read Aloud Revival podcast. Now, this is a fabulous resource because any kind of mom can read aloud, and it is a wonderful way to build your child's language skills and also make connections with your kids. And this is not just for little kids. We're talking about reading aloud all the way up until the time that your kids are teens, and there are definite research-based reasons to do that. So do go check out the Read Aloud Revival podcast at readaloudrevival.com. The next thing I have for you is a paid resource, but it is a really good one. It's called Homeschooling with Purpose. And what this is a 14-module video course that really walks you through the basics of getting started with homeschooling. So it takes you from making your homeschool vision all the way through, oh my goodness, how in the world am I going to get meals on the table and get the laundry done when now so much of my day is taken up with homeschooling? And so homeschoolingwithpurpose.com, it is a fabulous course that walks you step by step through how to do that. And I actually created that course along with Colleen Kessler from Raising Lifelong Learners and Jamie Martin from Simple Homeschools. My next resource for you is actually a language arts curriculum. This one is a fabulous resource. It's IEW.com. And what they do at IEW is they empower moms to teach their kids writing in a fun and systematic way that makes really proficient writers out of kids. And they also have grammar programs over there. They have poetry programs over there. They have essay programs, but they really run the gamut from your youngest writers to your oldest writers, all the way up through, kids who are learning to write for college and everything in between. And one of the things I love about them most of all is all of the resources that they provide to help the parent feel confident in teaching writing. So do go check that one out. Their founder, Andrew Pudewa, has homeschooled his kids along with his wife for years and years and years. They've got all of their children are adults now, and they're like starting on the second generation with the grandchildren. And so there is such a wealth of knowledge there, and they understand homeschoolers really, really well. So I'll drop a link to that in the show notes. And then the final thing that I have for you to consider is my own other podcast, my flagship podcast, the Your Morning Basket podcast. I would encourage you to check that out because that is going to do a few things for you. That is going to help you learn to combine your kids so that it can be a more efficient use of your homeschooling time. It's going to help you learn to focus on more than just the math, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, and really start to focus on other beautiful, wonderful subjects that have been sucked out of the public school system, but as homeschoolers, we get to add back in for our kids. And it's going to help you build those relationships and create a family culture that is going to grow your family closer together, which is one of the things that you want to do when you are homeschooling. So welcome to the wonderful world of homeschooling. We are so happy that you are joining us here on this homeschooling journey. We would love to connect with you. And you know what? Homeschoolers just want other homeschoolers to be successful. So welcome, welcome. And we are so glad you're here. Now, I'll be back again next week. We're going to be talking about probably one of the hardest things about homeschooling, which is getting started in the morning. Sometimes there are some issues with that. So I'm going to be back with some tips on how to do that well. And until I'm back next week, keep on homeschooling.